It's fair to say things have not gone as planned in Calgary this season. Could we see some potential significant changes in that lineup? Plus, we also have seen Jonathan Drouin play some better hockey lately for the Habs as he created a trade market for himself to finish the season somewhere else. Plus, we also have some trade rumors around the Florida Panthers as well. Patrick Kane has spoken out on some comments regarding the Hawks' handling of Kirby Dach. We have news from the NHL waiver wire, injury updates, and more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today. First up, we have a pretty significant signing in Los Angeles to discuss. The Los Angeles Kings have signed a young defenseman, Mikey Anderson. He gets an 8-year contract extension, the max allowable term, at $4.125 million per season. Anderson's been a great fit on the blue line for the Los Angeles Kings, as it kind of confirmed himself being a consistent, steady, important member of the top 4D, and gets a long-term deal. So he's going to be part of that D-course future for many years to come. We know the Kings have been linked to Jacob Chychrun lately. I know there was some rumblings that the Kings were going to have some news coming. Some people thought it might have been a Chychrun trade, but no, it was the Anderson signing instead. Be interested to see, though, if they do finalize that deal, or if it does happen, how he'll fit in there. They have a lot of other young D as well. It's hard to say which ones will be the long-term future in LA and which pieces could be used as trade bait. But a good contract for Mikey Anderson, and I think it's a good deal for LA. He's more of a stay-at-home defender, not afraid to play the gritty style game. I think that's a good value for what kind of minutes and all the roles that he plays with LA. News from the NHL waiver wire: Toronto Maple Leafs forward Wayne Simmonds did in fact clear waivers as expected today. So they can technically assign him to the Toronto Marlies, which they likely will do as a paper transaction. We don't expect Wayne to actually go down and play. They've not made him do that this year. It's really just for where he's going to be slotted on a roster there. But he's cleared, so that's good news. He doesn't even have to do that, but if they want to do that to make room on the roster, they can, which is likely going to be taking place for their next game here. There's no new additional waiver wire activity as of today. But part of what might be causing Simmonds to be demoted would be the fact that Austin Matthews is returning to the Toronto Maple Leafs lineup in tonight's game after suffering an injury, missing some time before the All-Star break. He's not ready to come back, so those two moves could be kind of linked there. Either way, Simmonds will not be in the Leafs lineup likely for a little while here. Outside of Matthews returning tonight, a few other injuries from around the league. The Avalanche have confirmed they're going to be without a couple of key members for at least a few weeks' time. Goalie Pavel Francouz, who we reported yesterday, went on injured reserve. We now know it's going to be more than just a few days or a week or so. Francouz is going to be out for at least a few weeks, according to Jared Bednar. He also made the same mention of defenseman Erik Johnson, who's going to be out for at least a few weeks by the looks of things as well. So that's some bad blow for a team that's struggling to hold on to a playoff spot. The defending Stanley Cup champions are really bruised and battered and beaten up this year, and they've lost a lot of man games, and that very well could end up costing them the playoffs. We'll have to wait and see how they make out here. The Montreal Canadiens have announced that young rookie defenseman Arber Xhekaj is out indefinitely, suffering an upper body injury, which came a few days ago against the Edmonton Oilers. I think it might have been part of a fight. I'm not sure exactly what the injury was. I only caught bits and pieces of that game, so I'm not sure, but Xhekaj will be out for a while. Obviously, he's had a nice rookie season, but a nice discovery in addition to that Habs blue line. So that's certainly nice to see. It's unfortunate to see him get hurt and have to miss a big chunk of the remaining part of the regular season. Of course, we also talked before about yesterday that Alex Ovechkin was taking a leave of absence from the Washington Capitals. It was personal due to some sort of a family-related health situation. No other details were released at that time, but Ovechkin on Instagram today did make the announcement that his father has passed away. So obviously it was his dad that was the family member that he was going to see. So no clear yet the direction or when Ovi will be back, but certainly where he just passed, it was reported he's going to be probably at least next week. Obviously he'll spend time with his family going through, the funeral process and all that. So condolences to Ovechkin and his family, but that's now the reason we know what was going on. One rumor out of the Carolina Hurricanes organization, forward Andre Kase, who was suspected to possibly be out for the rest of the season. This guy's had such a bad run of concussions and the worst luck in the world sometimes, I swear. Is possibly heading back to Europe next year. He's on an expiring contract with Carolina. They said there's a possibility he's out for the rest of the year. He's on IR right now. May not be back for the playoffs. I guess it's always possible the Canes go deep in the playoffs, maybe, but no clear answer there. But it's expected that he's going to end his time in the NHL and likely trying to sign over in Czechia for next year and beyond. So we might have seen the last of Ondrej Kase in the NHL, or at least if he does make it back this year, this could be the end. But we'll wait and see where things go, and if that actually ends up coming to be. We had talked the other day as well about a top NHL prospect, and as Halifax Moosehead forward Zachary Allred, who has been suspended indefinitely. We now know the full outcome of that review by the league. The QMJHL has announced that the Nashville Predators' former first-round pick is going to be out for 10 games due to sticking his stick through the glass, trying to attack a teenage fan. I mean, he tried multiple times to hit the fan with the stick. I don't know if he was actually successful or not based on the video footage. It's kind of far away and a little, not the greatest quality, you could say, so it's hard to say. I don't know if there's anything further there, but 10-game suspension. I believe he's been suspended 9 times, I think it is, over his 4-year Quebec Major Junior Hockey League career. So certainly, some issues there that the young man has to work on to get himself into the NHL. So there's some character issues for sure that I'm sure the Preds are likely concerned about. But he is a good hockey player when he sticks to playing hockey on the ice and gets away from some of that stuff off the ice that he's, and obviously other things that have caused him to be suspended. But like I said, he's got some maturing to do, I think it's fair to say. Now, on to the trade section of the video. We had a significant report from Dave Pagnon on the fourthfury.com today, and I want to go over that, as well as some news on Montreal and Carolina and Florida. And also, well, first though, I want to talk about Patrick Kane. We know we've talked the last few days about maybe going to the Leafs, maybe going to the Oilers. Lots of speculation on where he might end up. We should know soon between him and Hawks captain Jonathan Toews if they're going to agree to waive the no-trade clauses to facilitate a trade. I'm not sure exactly how public this is going to become, or it's going to have to be something that the insiders dig up, or if they'll actually put out a statement themselves, or the team, or what have you. We don't know how this is all going to go down, but Patrick Kane did make some interesting comments against the Hawks and the former prospect and a player who's now flourishing in Montreal, and that's Kirby Dach. Of course, Kane had the chance to play with Dach for a short spell after Dach was the number 3 overall pick in the draft a few years back. Kane basically commented, and I'll show you here a tweet from a reporter, Mark Lazarus, who quoted this on Twitter. Basically, Kane, to summarize here, said that it doesn't surprise him that Dach is having success in Montreal and he's making the most of the opportunity, that he was certainly probably rushed into the NHL, in another lineup, playing 4th line minutes, and it wasn't shocking to him that, he's doing much better in Montreal, and that obviously all those things are not the best for your career development. So that sounds to me like a bit of a shot against the organization and how they handled Kirby Dach. We don't know, like I said, at this point for sure if he wants to be traded. There's, a lot of speculation. We've heard lots of rumblings, which we'll continue to discuss here in the channel as the news comes out, as the news breaks. But just interesting to hear Kane kind of speak out against the organization's handling of one of their former top prospects and somebody who we thought might become the future number 1 center in Chicago. And instead, he's in Montreal now. And of course, the Hawks ended up getting a first-round pick in that deal. But, will that defenseman who was turned out to be Kevin Korchinski be as good and important to the franchise long-term? Only time will tell. Now, on to the other section of the trade video. Let's start with Florida. All this information comes from Dave Pagnon, as I mentioned, at fourthfury.com, put out a new article, which I'll link in the pinned comment down below. Some pretty significant information, according to him and his sources here today. Starting with Florida, we know that the Anthony Duclair is really close to returning. He's now practicing with the team with a regular sweater, none of the non-contact stuff. That's all been shedded. So he's really close. It's just a matter of when he feels 100% and gives the coaching staff the thumbs up that he's ready to go in. That could trigger a trade because the cap-wise to activate him, they're in a pretty difficult situation. Now, you never know. Something else could change here in the coming days. Another injury could happen. You just don't know, right? At the same time, the Florida Panthers, you can fair to say, not having the season they suspected. I know a lot of them, after a lot of people that cover the Panthers expect them to do better this year. I did as well, but maybe not to the extent of some. I really did think they would take a big step back this year. Much as Matthew Tkachuk is a phenomenal player, and landing him from Calgary was significant for the long-term future of the franchise. Short-term, I just didn't see them being quite as good. You take Huberdeau away, you take Weegar away. I figured there was going to be some big holes to fill. Tkachuk's a completely different player than Huberdeau. And the Florida Panther blue line, to me, was already one of the weaker areas of the team. And then you take Weegar out of the equation. I just wasn't sure that this blue line, as it stands today, if you look at the blue line on paper, to me, it's a major concern. And going into, especially into a playoff race and into a playoff series, if they were going to qualify, would be tough and challenging. Goaltending has not been consistent as well. So I certainly have a lot of concerns over the franchise. But rumor has it that between Sam Bennett, Sam Reinhart, or Duclair himself, one of those three players are likely going to have to be moved just from a strictly financial and cap space, cap compliance standpoint. That it's going to be difficult to get Duclair into the lineup without having one of them moved. And in some capacity, like I said, unless there's another subsequent move they can do to kind of free up some space through injury or LTIR or something to that effect. I don't know. But certainly, I think as we get closer to the deadline, it might become clear that the Panthers might turn into sellers, and they might have to shed a little bit, continue to take a step back before they can take a big step forward with the changes that they made last offseason. Now, Carolina Hurricanes, of course, we know, one of the top teams in the league, certainly expected to be a force in the playoffs, possibly go on a deep run, be one of the teams you would expect to be in the chase and the hunt here for the Stanley Cup. General Manager Don Waddell himself in an interview confirmed that his first-round pick in the 2023 NHL draft is absolutely on the table for the right player. We know the Canes' history, and based on his comments in this interview, that the Canes prefer not to pick up rental players. They would probably prefer, in all cases, to acquire a player with term who could not only help today, but stick around, giving up an asset like a first-round pick or others, that it's going to be more beneficial on a long-term basis. They have been linked to players like Timo Meier. A JT Miller as well was not completely out of the question just because he signed that long-term deal in Vancouver. I would not be shocked if the Canucks did explore possibly moving him. They've seen, obviously, that's not going to be easy to do, though, based on how the season has gone in Vancouver. And for Miller specifically, that's going to be challenging. I think a lot of teams will be skeptical to take Miller on at that new cap hit that he signed for, which doesn't even kick in until next season at that full length and full value. The way his season has gone, attitude-wise, the effort-wise, the production-wise, there's concerns now with GT Miller, whereas a year ago, a lot of teams were talking to Vancouver about possibly trading for him, but the excitement of possibly keeping him and extending them themselves. And now it's a completely different feeling based on how things have changed. So as much as I put Miller in that conversation, I would probably be a little more surprised if Carolina made the move. But of course, with having Pacioretty done for the season, they do have a big pool of LTIR they can expand and use. Out of all the contending teams, they do have one of the more flexible cap situations as well. So I would think they have the ability, along with that first-round pick and any prospects in the organization that they might be willing to consider here, that they have that option to do a significant move. And Timo Meier is not out of the realm of possibilities here. But I'm sure if they get Meier, they would prefer to do so with an extension. But there are some reports saying that Meier might be one of the players that they actually, might consider training for without having that in place, because he's still not a UFA and they don't have to lose him for nothing. It's a different scenario. Timo Meier is an RFA. If they can't sign him or get the vibe that he's not interested in staying there long term, they use him for the playoff run, and maybe at the draft they turn around and trade him to another team that can sign him and get some assets back. So at least you can kind of recoup what you spent on him in the first place. So it's not all bad. There's so many different scenarios with Meier, but look for the Hurricanes to be willing to move their first-round pick in a potential big trade to bolster that lineup. And I would suspect that it's most likely going to be a forward. Probably they'd prefer a center, but they'll probably take a high-scoring winger if they can get it, depending on where things are at and what's available and what the cost is of all these different players. In Montreal, I do want to talk about Jonathan Drouin. Dave Pagnotta references him in this report as well. For the most part of this year, I would have said Jonathan Drouin does not have a market. There's no way the Habs are going to be able to trade him by the deadline to get anything back, because he's missed so much time, and when he has been in, he hasn't produced. But lately, he's been playing some better hockey. Jonathan Drouin has put up 9 assists in his last 6 games. Was kind of showing that old flair of the playmaking ability like he used to in the past. And there's some now wondering, according to the Dave's report here, that maybe some teams will be interested. Now, unfortunately for the teams looking at considering him, a couple of downfalls. For one, he's making $5.5 million, so the Habs could retain 50% for the rest of the year. So that's still 2.25. You're definitely going to need some decent production for that kind of price tag. At the same time, Durant's not the kind of player who, in my opinion, you can play in a bottom 6 role. I think he needs to thrive with offensive players and ideally a top 6, maybe third line, but not really. I think he's just not as versatile as some guys. So depending on where you want to slot him, I think will help determine if he's going to be successful or not. I don't see Jerard returning to Montreal next year. I'm sure that they'll, gladly advise him that they're not going to offer a new contract if he's not traded, and he'll move on and find what else is out there for work for him to continue his NHL career, if that's what he desires to do. But at the same time, we'll see what happens. But like I said, a couple weeks ago, I said, no, Jerard is likely not getting traded. He hasn't played well. I don't think there's really any interest, but now there appears to be creating at least some, but we'll see. I don't expect Montreal to get much of anything for a return, even by retaining 50%. I'm going to say maybe a 4th, 5th round pick, probably the best they're going to do, or B-level prospect. It's not going to be much, but they might be able to get a little something. Now, on to the Calgary Flames and a whole spin-off effect here. Now, we know the Flames have not had the season they were hoping for. They had a phenomenal year last year, didn't go as deep in the playoffs as they were hoping, lost in the Battle of Alberta playoff round. But at the end of the day, they made that massive trade. They lost Johnny Gaudreau in free agency, were forced to trade Matthew Tkachuk. Completely different Calgary Flames team this year. They acquired Huberdeau and Weegar for Tkachuk. A lot of people said, geez, you know what? Considering what the team was up against, Brad Treliving did a phenomenal job under the circumstances. And I agree with that. He did. He was forced to make moves he didn't want to make, but he did get a great deal. Now, of course, the risky part, though, is that he signed Huberdeau before he ever played a game. Weegar got signed early in the year as well. They're both on 8-year contract extensions, and at this point, they haven't even kicked in, haven't started yet, and you can make an argument that neither player is living up to expectations. They're both having some of the worst seasons of their career, statistically speaking, in quite some time. And Weegar's numbers are way down offensively. Huberdeau's numbers way down offensively. He's on pace for like 54, 55 points, where he's been more of a 85, 90, 95 point player. So certainly that's drastically different. Not the numbers they were expecting. You can make an argument that maybe Daryl Sutter's feeling a little bit of pressure as well, although I'm not really sure 100% how the org feels about it. Treliving's likely not going to remove Sutter, I wouldn't think, but I would, depending on how the year goes, would they go to a new direction next year? Maybe. I mean, Sutter's certainly a unique coach. Has made some comments, especially around Jacob Pelletier recently after Pelletier made his NHL debut. Was asked about it by reporters, saying, basically pretending he didn't know who he was and what's his number, looking at the stat sheet. It's just a complete clown show, in my opinion. But Markstrom's had a bad season in goal. Vladar's probably taken over the starting reins going forward. It's just a mess. They lost a major, give up here in the late game against the Ottawa Senators the other night and had a 3-1 lead a couple minutes ago. Sens come back, tie it up, and then win it overtime. It's just been one of those years. So there's a lot of talk now that maybe the Flames are going to consider something more significant. There's a variety of things linked here. And if one thing that Pagano starts off here is that the Ottawa Senators have been still kind of kicking around Mackenzie Weegar. Now, I've seen some people refuting reports saying that the Flames are not shopping Weegar, but Pagano's not saying that either. He never said the Flames were actively looking to trade him. He just signed an 8-year contract. I'm sure they'd like to make him a part of the team's solution in the future, but at the same time, it doesn't cause or stop other teams from sniffing around thinking, hey, you guys are not having the season you want. You might want to make some changes. Wonder if I could get that guy on my team, right? So that's probably all it was, because it was long rumored the Sens had a lot of interest in Weegar, who was an Ottawa native, before he was traded. When he was still in Florida and rumors were starting to circulate that the Panthers might consider trading Weegar, the Sens were reportedly very interested in that. Never got a chance to get a deal done before he was shipped to Calgary in a blockbuster trade. And, I'm sure if they somehow think now, even with the contract extension, that he could be available, they're going to perk up and probably want to talk to Treliving and the Calgary Flames. So we know the Senators have long been looking for a top 4 rate shot defenseman. He would fit perfectly beside Thomas Chabot. You could put a Zoop with Sanderson. really, instead of going after a guy like Chychrun, who they've been, haven't been linked to in a while, but at one point were heavily rumored to be interested in, it would be a game changer for Ottawa. Now, I'm not sure what the price tag would have to be to get him, but that's another story. The fact is that they're interested in kind of kicking around and talking to the Flames to see if they might be willing to make a move. Now, the other piece in this article also suggested the Flames have also been showing interest in guys like Luke Schenn and Brock Boeser in Vancouver. I mean, we know at one point I used to tease and make fun and say the Calgary Canucks were, the team on the rise. So they got so many former Canuck players there, between Markstrom and Tanev and Foley and all that. Like at one point, it just seemed like they were all going to Calgary out of Vancouver. A couple more would fit right in. So obviously, Brock Boeser would be a player who would go into their top 9. They've been looking for a top 9 forward for an extended period of time as well since the end of the offseason. It's never been found. They've tried internal options. Pelletier's not doing too bad, so maybe they ride with him, but I don't know if they have a lot of confidence yet going into a potential playoff series because they're not even guaranteed playoffs. But at this point, they want to make sure they get in, and they need probably more experience to do that. Luke Schenn's a different kind of defenseman, cheaper contract. Might not be a long-term fit there. It's hard to say if he'd resign or not, but still, Boeser and Schenn going to Calgary. If they had to shed Weegar's contract, that maybe that works. Hard to say. I mean, that's not necessarily the same deal per se, but at the end of the day, that's another Calgary rumor. And there's also rumors that the Flames might be looking to maybe consider a Weegar trade because they might be getting in on the Chychrun sweepstakes. Now, I'm not sure that they can really satisfy Arizona, to be completely honest. I don't know they have enough assets. They'd probably have to move multiple first-round picks and then a top prospect as well, but maybe they get it done. So there's a variety of things floating around. Some people think that they're going for Chychrun and that maybe they might have to move Weegar to get Chychrun. It gives them a whole different dynamic, different kind of defenseman. And like I said, there's some that think that maybe they just want to shake things up. Maybe they bring in Schenn and Boeser from Vancouver, move Weegar to Ottawa. And obviously there could be a variety. It could even be a three-way deal if you think about it. If the Canuck players, or Calgary wants the Canuck players and Ottawa wants Weegar, who's to say that, we could have Boeser and Schenn go to Calgary. We could have Weegar go to Ottawa, and Vancouver perhaps gets future assets from both clubs. A case of maybe they get some kind of combination of picks and prospects from both teams. Like that could possibly actually work. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. There's no rumor suggesting they've had those discussions, but it's just kind of interesting how, things have not gone well in Calgary this year. The Sens also trying to move Nikita Zaitsev. Also have some teams interested, like apparently San Jose, Anaheim, Arizona. The rumored teams to be there. And a Zaitsev trade as a salary dump for Ottawa might be being held up by other guys like Chychrun not being moved yet. So it'd be like a whole series of events that could take place. This is not something that's guaranteed to happen by any means. But at the same time, like I said, Ottawa appears to be poking around about Weegar. Doesn't mean they're going to make a move. But when things are not going well, we know changes come. And things have not gone well in Calgary. In fact, this article is actually titled Hot Mess in Calgary with some potential changes that we could see coming. So let me know your thoughts. Should the Ottawa Senators continue to pursue Mackenzie Weegar in Calgary? Do you think Calgary would actually consider that trade and maybe use that additional cap space to pivot towards a different defenseman, whether it be Chychrun in Arizona or maybe some kind of a bigger deal with the Canucks, bringing in Schenn and Boeser? I mean, it gives them a whole different dynamic, make some changes. Hard to say what happens. Your thoughts on all that and everything discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.